Have you ever stood at the edge of a mountain just as dawn breaks across the horizon? That moment when darkness retreats and light begins to paint the world in golden hues. There's something profound in that transition, a visual symphony that has captivated human hearts since the beginning of time. In 1804, the English poet William Wordsworth stood upon Westminster Bridge at daybreak and was so moved by the sight that he penned his famous sonnet declaring that earth has not anything to show more fair. But nearly 3,000 years before Wordsworth, an ancient king of Israel experienced a similar stirring of the soul and called out to the dawn itself, "Awake, my soul! Awake, harp and lyre! I will awaken the dawn!" What could inspire such passionate words? What kind of confidence allows someone to believe they could rouse the morning with mere music? The answer lies in one of history's most remarkable poems of faith and determination, Psalm 108. Today, we embark on a journey through this ancient Song of David, a composition that begins in personal devotion and expands to encompass national hope, divine promises, and the timeless human struggle between despair and confidence. Did you know that Psalm 108 is actually a composite psalm, the only one of its kind in the biblical Psalter? It combines portions of two other psalms, Psalm 57 verses 7 to 11 and Psalm 60 verses 5 to 12, creating something entirely new. Like a master musician sampling familiar melodies to create a fresh composition, David took fragments of previous expressions and wove them together for a specific purpose. This unique characteristic of Psalm 108 raises a fascinating question. Why would someone intentionally combine existing words rather than create something entirely new? What urgent message required this deliberate act of spiritual and literary synthesis? Scholars place the composition of this psalm in approximately 1010 BC, during David's reign as king over Israel. The period was marked by military expansion and political consolidation. After decades of division and uncertainty, the tribes of Israel had united under David's leadership, and the nation was emerging as a regional power. Yet with this new prominence came significant threats. Neighboring peoples like the Philistines, Edomites, and Moabites viewed Israel's growth with alarm. Military confrontations were frequent, and the survival of this fledgling kingdom remained uncertain. It is against this backdrop, expansion, threat, and the need for divine assistance, that Psalm 108 emerges. The psalm speaks to that moment when human capability has reached its limit, and only divine intervention can secure victory. Let's hear the voice of David himself as he opens this remarkable prayer. My heart, O God, is steadfast. I will sing and make music with all my soul. Awake, harp and lyre! I will awaken the dawn. I will praise you, Lord, among the nations. I will sing of you among the peoples. For great is your love, higher than the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the skies. Notice how David begins, not with his request, not with his problem, but with a declaration of his own readiness. My heart is steadfast, or fixed, or prepared, in some translations. Before seeking God's action, David affirms his own commitment. This phrase, my heart is prepared, carried profound significance in ancient Hebrew culture. The heart represented the center of decision-making, the core of one's being. To have a prepared heart meant to possess unwavering resolve, unshakable commitment. David doesn't approach God with hesitancy or uncertainty, but with complete devotion. In 970 BC, when Jerusalem was established as the capital of Israel, one of David's first acts was to bring the Ark of the Covenant into the city with tremendous celebration. Historical accounts describe him dancing, with all his might, before the Ark, an expression of this same wholehearted commitment we see in Psalm 108. The psalm continues with a beautiful metaphor. I will awaken the dawn. In ancient Near Eastern thought, dawn was often personified as a being that needed to be roused each morning. But here, David audaciously claims that his worship will precede and even provoke the morning itself. His praise will not follow the natural order, it will help initiate it. Archaeological findings from Iron Age Israel, 1200 to 586 BC, have uncovered numerous musical instruments similar to those mentioned in the psalm: harps, lyres, and other stringed instruments that would have accompanied temple worship and royal ceremonies. Music wasn't merely entertainment. It was considered a powerful spiritual force capable of altering reality itself. But David's focus quickly moves beyond personal devotion to universal proclamation. I will praise you, Lord, among the nations. I will sing of you among the peoples. For great is your love, higher than the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the skies. The Hebrew word used for love here is chesed, a term that defies simple translation. It encompasses loyalty, covenant faithfulness, steadfast love, and merciful kindness. Unlike emotional love that fluctuates with feeling, chesed represents commitment that endures regardless of circumstance. When David compares this love to the height of the heavens, he employs a metaphor his audience would immediately grasp. In the ancient world, the visible sky represented the ultimate measure of height and expanse. To say God's love exceeded this boundary was to declare it immeasurable by human standards. This astronomical comparison would have been particularly meaningful around 1000 BC, when celestial observation was central to agricultural timing, navigation, and religious practice. The heavens represented the realm beyond human reach, yet David boldly claims that divine love exceeds even this vast expanse. After establishing his own readiness and acknowledging God's character, David then pivots to a striking petition. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. Save us and help us with your right hand, that those you love may be delivered. Notice the connection between God's exaltation and human deliverance. For David, these weren't separate concerns. Divine glory and human rescue were intimately linked. When God displays his power, his people experience salvation. The phrase, right hand, carried special significance in ancient Near Eastern culture. In royal contexts around 1000 BC, the right hand symbolized authority, power, and effective action. When kings dispensed justice or led armies, they employed right-handed imagery to communicate legitimate power. By invoking God's right hand, David appeals to divine authority properly exercised. But what motivated this urgent prayer for deliverance? The historical context becomes clearer as we continue. God has spoken from his sanctuary. In triumph I will parcel out Shechem and measure off the valley of Succos. Gilead is mine, and Manasseh is mine. Ephraim is my helmet, Judah is my scepter. Moab is my wash basin, on Edom I toss my sandal, over Philistia I shout in triumph. This passage references specific geographical locations that held strategic importance during David's reign. Shechem was a major city in central Israel, while the valley of Succos lay east of the Jordan River. Gilead and Manasseh represented eastern territories, while Ephraim constituted the central hill country. Archaeological excavations at Shechem, conducted between 1913 and 1989, revealed its significance as a major administrative center dating back to the Middle Bronze Age, 2000 to 1550 BC. By David's time, controlling this region was essential for maintaining authority over the northern tribes. The military imagery intensifies with references to Ephraim as a helmet, and Judah as a scepter, protective and authoritative elements of royal power. Then David mentions surrounding nations in terms of subjugation, Moab as a wash basin, a humble vessel, Edom receiving his sandal, a symbol of conquest, and Philistia hearing his shout of victory. Historical records from the 10th century BC confirm ongoing conflicts with these specific neighbors. The Moabites occupied territory east of the Dead Sea, while the Edomites controlled regions to the southeast. The Philistines, Israel's persistent adversaries, inhabited the coastal plain to the west. These weren't abstract enemies but real threats that David's kingdom faced. Archaeological evidence from sites like Tel Arad and Khirbet Qiyafah reveals extensive fortification systems built during this period, testifying to the genuine military pressures Israel experienced. But then, in a remarkable shift, David asks, "Who will bring me to the fortified city? Who will lead me to Edom?" After declaring God's sovereignty over these territories, David acknowledges a practical problem. He lacks the capacity to secure these conquests himself. The fortified city likely refers to Petra, or Sela, the capital of Edom, carved into rose-colored cliffs and virtually impregnable to ancient military techniques. Archaeological excavations at Petra confirm its extraordinary natural defenses: narrow gorges providing limited access, high cliffs offering protection, and elevated positions allowing defenders to repel much larger forces. For David to contemplate conquering such a stronghold would require divine intervention. The psalm reaches its emotional climax with a confession of abandonment and a reaffirmation of hope. "Is it not you, God, you who have now rejected us and no longer go out with our armies? Give us aid against the enemy, for human help is worthless. With God we will gain the victory, and He will trample down our enemies." Here we encounter the central tension of the psalm, and perhaps of all faith. David simultaneously acknowledges divine absence, "You who have rejected us," and appeals for divine presence. "Give us aid." He names the experience of abandonment, while refusing to accept it as final. Historical context helps us understand this apparent contradiction. During the turbulent period of Judges preceding David's kingship, approximately 1380 to 1050 BC, Israel experienced repeated cycles of divine blessing, human unfaithfulness, divine withdrawal, suffering, repentance, and restoration. This pattern was deeply ingrained in Israel's national consciousness by David's time. The phrase, "No longer go out with our armies," reflects ancient warfare practices where divine symbols, like the Ark of the Covenant, would physically accompany troops into battle. In a famous incident around 1050 BC, the Ark was captured by Philistines after Israel's defeat at Ebenezer, a traumatic national memory that informed David's language here. The psalm concludes with one of the most powerful statements of faith in Scripture. "With God we will gain the victory, and He will trample down our enemies." Despite acknowledging divine absence, despite confronting impossible obstacles, despite recognizing human limitation, human help is worthless, David concludes with absolute confidence. The Hebrew verb form used here expresses certainty about future action. This isn't wishful thinking, it's settled conviction. Archaeological findings from David's era show that Israel was militarily disadvantaged compared to surrounding powers like Egypt and Assyria. They lacked the resources, population, and technology of these major empires. Yet historical records confirm that under David's leadership, Israel achieved remarkable territorial expansion and security. What does this ancient poem teach us about facing our own seemingly impossible situations? First, it demonstrates the power of beginning with personal preparation rather than external demands. David starts with, "My heart is steadfast," before requesting, "Give us aid." His approach prioritizes internal readiness over external circumstances. Second, it illustrates how remembering God's character and promises provides foundation for present confidence. David recalls specific divine declarations. God has spoken from His sanctuary, as the basis for his hope. Third, it models honest acknowledgement of reality without surrender to it. David doesn't deny the experience of divine absence or human limitation, But he refuses to grant these conditions final authority. The contextual background of Psalm 108 reveals striking parallels to our contemporary experience. The psalm emerged from a period of national development amid external threats, a reality many communities and nations still navigate today. It addresses the universal human question: how do we persist when the gap between promise and fulfillment seems unbridgeable? In the archaeological record of ancient Israel, we find evidence of persistent rebuilding after destruction, layers upon layers showing how communities reconstructed their lives following warfare, natural disaster, and political collapse. This material testimony to human resilience provides the physical backdrop for Psalm 108's spiritual message. Consider the testimony of history since David's time. In 587 BC, Jerusalem fell to Babylonian forces, and the temple, the very symbol of God's presence, was destroyed. Yet within decades, returning exiles began rebuilding. In 70 CE, the Second Temple was demolished by Roman armies, yet Jewish faith persisted. In countless iterations across cultures and centuries, communities have embodied the Psalm's final declaration: "With God we will gain the victory." The Hebrew term for victory used here, chayil, carries multiple meanings: strength, efficiency, wealth, army, ability. It encompasses not just military success but comprehensive flourishing. David envisions not merely defeating enemies but experiencing abundant life. What makes Psalm 108 particularly valuable is its composite nature. By combining portions of earlier psalms into a new whole, it demonstrates how ancient wisdom can be reapplied to new circumstances. The psalm itself models the process of taking eternal truths and reshaping them to address present needs. When David first composed the original components of this psalm around 1020 BC, he couldn't have anticipated how his words would console and inspire countless individuals across millennia. From Babylonian exiles in the 6th century BC to medieval monastics in the 12th century CE to modern readers in the 21st century, these words have provided language for navigating the tension between promise and fulfillment. The enduring power of Psalm 108 lies in its unflinching honesty combined with unshakable hope. It doesn't offer cheap optimism that ignores reality, nor does it surrender to despair that denies possibility. Instead, it charts a middle path, acknowledging genuine obstacles while affirming greater power. In 2008, archaeologists working at Khirbet Qeiyafa in Israel discovered an inscription dating to David's era that contains phrases similar to biblical poetry, suggesting that the literary tradition represented in the Psalms was already developing during this period. This finding helps confirm that the spiritual perspective of Psalm 108 genuinely reflects the historical context from which it emerged. For those facing personal Edoms, fortified cities of illness, relationship breakdown, financial hardship, or professional setback, Psalm 108 offers a time-tested approach. Begin with personal preparation. Remember divine character. Acknowledge reality without surrendering to it. And move forward with conviction that transcends circumstance. The Psalm's opening image of awakening the dawn carries particular power. In ancient cosmology, darkness was not merely the absence of light but an active force that required daily defeat. By claiming the ability to awaken the dawn, David wasn't merely describing early rising, he was declaring participation in the fundamental cosmic battle between light and darkness. This metaphor speaks powerfully to moments when we find ourselves in seemingly endless night. The psalm reminds us that dawn always comes, but sometimes it needs awakening. Our participation, through steadfast hearts, through music and praise, through determined faith, helps usher in the light. Historical records from various ancient Near Eastern cultures contain morning hymns, similar to the opening of Psalm 108. In Egyptian religious texts from around 1400 BC, we find worshippers addressing the sun god Ra at daybreak. In Babylonian rituals from 800 BC, priests performed specific musical arrangements as the sun rose. David's psalm shares this tradition of connecting human devotion with cosmic renewal. What distinguishes Psalm 108, however, is its integration of personal devotion, national history, divine promise, and human responsibility. Unlike purely ritualistic morning prayers, this psalm connects the daily renewal of light with the broader spiritual and historical journey of a community. The psalm's concluding confidence, "With God we will gain the victory," emerges not from denial of difficulty but from decision to view present challenges through the lens of divine capability. David looks at the same circumstances twice, first through the lens of human abandonment, "You who have rejected us," and then through the lens of divine partnership. "With God we will gain the victory." This dual vision defines faithful living. It doesn't require pretending that fortified cities aren't formidable, or that human help isn't limited. It simply refuses to grant these realities the final word. Archaeological evidence confirms that David's kingdom did indeed achieve remarkable victories despite significant disadvantages. Excavations at sites like Tel Dan have uncovered inscriptions from neighboring kingdoms that reference the House of David, confirming his historical impact on the region. The territorial expansions described in biblical accounts align with archaeological findings showing Israelite cultural influence spreading during this period. But perhaps the most powerful testimony to Psalm 108's enduring truth is its preservation and transmission across cultures and centuries. Written in ancient Hebrew around 1010 BC, it was later incorporated into Greek translation in the Septuagint, completed around 132 BC, then into Latin in the Vulgate, completed around 405 CE, and subsequently into countless languages worldwide. At each stage of transmission, new generations facing their own fortified cities and impossible obstacles found resonance in these ancient words. They discovered that the gap between divine promise and human experience, the very tension that animates Psalm 108, was not unique to David's time but universal to human existence. In 70 CE, as Roman legions surrounded Jerusalem, Jewish defenders looked to psalms like this one for courage. In 1620, as pilgrims faced their first harsh winter in Plymouth, these words provided perspective. During World War II, as London endured the Blitz, congregations sang psalms including these passages. The specific enemies changed, but the fundamental dynamics remained consistent. This historical continuity offers profound comfort. We are not the first to stand before fortified cities with limited resources. We are not the first to experience the gap between divine promise and present reality. We are not the first to navigate the tension between "You who have rejected us" and "With God we will gain the victory." What would it mean for us to approach our own challenges with hearts that are steadfast, prepared, fixed, established? How might our perspective shift if we began each day determined to awaken the dawn, rather than merely respond to circumstances? Neuroscience research conducted between 2010 and 2020 has demonstrated that beginning the day with practices of gratitude and affirmation, similar to David's opening declarations, significantly impacts stress hormones and cognitive functioning. The ancient wisdom of starting with a steadfast heart finds confirmation in contemporary understanding of how our mental approach shapes physiological response. The Psalm's emphasis on music, "I will sing and make music with all my soul," similarly aligns with modern research showing music's unique capacity to regulate emotion and enhance resilience. Studies conducted at McGill University between 2015 and 2023 demonstrated that musical engagement activates multiple brain regions simultaneously, creating neural patterns associated with both emotional processing and cognitive control. When David called for his harp and lyre, he wasn't merely following cultural convention, He was employing a powerful neurological tool for preparing his heart and mind to face adversity. And what of the Psalm's geopolitical claims, the assertions of sovereignty over specific territories? While we might not relate directly to ancient boundary disputes between Israel and Moab, the underlying principle remains relevant. Faith requires mapping divine promises onto specific real-world circumstances. David didn't merely affirm general divine goodness. He applied that confidence to particular geographic locations and political realities. Similarly, our faith must address actual relationships, concrete decisions, and specific challenges rather than remaining safely abstract. As we conclude our exploration of this ancient psalm, let's return to its opening image, awakening the dawn. What dawn needs awakening in your life today? What area of darkness seems resistant to light? What fortified city appears impregnable to your limited resources? Psalm 108 doesn't promise immediate transformation of these realities. It doesn't suggest that steadfast hearts automatically produce changed circumstances. But it does insist that approaching these challenges with prepared hearts, with remembrance of divine character, with honest acknowledgement of human limitation, and with unshakable confidence in ultimate victory creates the necessary conditions for dawn to break. In archaeological terms, the tell, or mound of an ancient city represents layer upon layer of construction, destruction, and rebuilding. Cities were conquered, demolished, and built again upon the same site, sometimes dozens of times over centuries. Each layer tells a story of both devastation and resilience. Our lives accumulate similar layers, experiences of promise and disappointment, of divine presence and apparent absence, of human limitation and supernatural intervention. Psalm 108 speaks to and from these accumulated layers, offering perspective that transcends any single moment of triumph or defeat. As we close, hear once more the voice of David echoing across 3 millennia. My heart, O God, is steadfast. I will sing and make music with all my soul. Awake, harp and lyre! I will awaken the dawn. With God we will gain the victory, and He will trample down our enemies. May these ancient words awaken new determination in your heart today. May they help you face your own fortified cities with confidence not in human capability but in divine partnership. And may you discover, as countless generations have before, that dawn always comes to those who have the courage to awaken it. In the gap between promise and fulfillment, in the space between you who have rejected us, and with God we will gain the victory, we find not despair but the most authentic expression of faith, choosing to believe despite evidence to the contrary, deciding to praise before circumstances change, determining to awaken the dawn while darkness still surrounds us. This is the enduring promise of Psalm 108. This is the testimony of history. This is the invitation before us today. Before you go, I want to personally invite you to be part of our growing community here at Prayer Universe. If this video touched your heart or brought you peace, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a prayer or message that can uplift your spirit. But most importantly, I'd love to hear from you. In the comments below, share just one word or phrase of motivation that this video inspired in you, whether it's hope, gratitude, peace, or something else. Your words matter deeply to us because they help guide the content we create for this channel. Together, let's build a space filled with faith, encouragement, and connection. Thank you for being here, and remember, every prayer counts. See you in the next one.